encourage your soul, enlighten your mind, and empower your faith. This is the Light Network. This is the podcast where every day is a great day with Jesus. Welcome to Today with Jesus. I'm Robert Hatfield.
And I'm Dan Winkler. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast today. I just wish we could see you eye to eye and just sit down and visit with one another and find out what's going on in your life. How about you, Robert? What's going on in yours?
That would be fun. Hey, it's Thanksgiving week as we're releasing this.
Yes,
and,
it is.
We've been a little negligent over the last few weeks. Part of that has been my travel schedule, and there's just been a lot going on. So we're actually recording this on the day that we're going to release it. And these things happen sometimes. But anyway, I'm looking forward to some turkey and some dressing and all that good stuff coming up a little later this week.
You better believe it.
You have big Thanksgiving plans, I'm sure.
We have some grandchildren coming to visit, and we're going to kick back and visit with them. We love to play games. And so when our families get together, we play games, and it can get very brutal. You can imagine that, I'm sure.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, I know. Well, let's be honest about this for a minute. You said we've been a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
You've been traveling.
Yeah.
I actually, I went and hid a while.
Oh,
Diane
you did?
and I went to Disney World and just had a wonderful time. We
Did
went
you
to
really?
3 of the parks and
Yeah.
went over to Universal, saw Harry Potter. That is outright cool. And I mean, it just really is. I did not buy one because I didn't feel like it would do me any good. You know, if you're a muggle, you just have to have the special powers for it to
But
really
you've
work.
got the beard for it.
I got I could have been Dumbledore.
You could have been Dumbledore.
Okay, I got it,
man.
I needed to buy me a pointed hat, and then they would have mistaken me and not let me leave.
That's right.
And then we went over to some of the other parks in Disney World, and we went over to Avatar and Animal Kingdom. That's just unbelievable.
Did you ride any rides?
Rode the rides there.
You
I mean,
did?
that banshee, and you feel the banshee breathing between your legs. And I texted some friends. I said, man, I am ready to move to Pandora. This is cool. But I tell you what, in Universal, the first thing we did was we rode the roller coaster called the Hulk.
Oh, okay.
Man, it shook my noggin. And I for the rest of the day, I was, I didn't know if I was talking to Diane or to Dan.
Oh, no.
We rode a lot of the roller coasters, but we realized that at 71 and 72, those days are behind us now.
Are they? Okay.
Got it out of our system.
You did it. Hopefully there's some pictorial evidence somewhere
From
to prove that all this
now
happened.
on, I'm just going to look for Mickey Mouse and Minnie and Pluto and Goofy and
all right.
that type of thing. But we had a good time. I did miss our being together in our podcast, but glad we can do this today and release it today, and
Yes.
then get right on track. Where are we today?
Well, we're in Luke, I do believe, continuing in what has been a really fun season 8, what Jesus meant by the title disciple.
Right.
We've been going through, we started with the Great Commission back in Matthew 28, and we noted that the task really that Jesus has given us is to make disciples.
Yes.
And the rest of the Great Commission informs us of how we do that. It's going to involve going, it's going to involve teaching, it's going to involve baptizing, it's going to involve further teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, we have that was our springboard to take us back to Matthew and to Luke and eventually to John, noting 9 different times when Jesus not only used the term disciple, but informed us relative to what his view of this term actually is and what it means.
It's really eye-opening, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
It will change your life. It truly, and no matter how long you've been a Christian or how committed to the Lord you've been, when you see what he meant by the word disciple, it will, and apply it to your life,
Mm,
it will change your
it's
life
challenging.
for the better,
Hmm.
and, you'll even be a greater witness for who He is and what He wants us to be.
Yeah.
We're in Luke 14. Would you
Hmm.
read for us? Let's do something.
Okay.
How about reading the entire paragraph, Luke 14, verses
Ah,
25 through 33?
okay.
And, I'm gonna when you're reading, I'm gonna make note of the times Jesus uses the word disciple in this reading. There are 3 of them,
Mm,
and, we've looked at one of them. We'll look at a second one today, and then the last one, for our episode, next week.
hmm.
Let's just read the paragraph, to begin with.
All right. Now great crowds accompanied him, and he turned and said to them, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he's laid a foundation and is not able to finish it, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and wasn't able to finish. Or what king, going out to encounter another king in war, will not sit down first and deliberate whether he's able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? And if not, while the other is yet a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. So therefore, any one of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple.
Okay. In that reading, Robert, I actually heard 2 of Jesus' parables.
Mhm.
There's that parable, of the unfinished tower, where a man began to build a tower and wasn't able to finish. And the motto or some in substance of that story is, uh, count the cost. Count the cost of discipleship in this contextual flow. And then the second parable was that of the prudent king who sat down and asked himself, now, here's how many soldiers I have, and look at all the soldiers this opposing king has. Can I, with my army, defeat his army? If not, we need to sit down and come to terms of peace. And the motto or key thought of that parable is pay the price. So you put them together, and Jesus, with these 2 stories in a context dealing with discipleship, says, you really need to count the cost of
Mm.
discipleship and then pay the price if you want to be my disciple. And so, if I counted correctly, there are 3 times he uses the word disciple. And in point of fact, there is uh, there's an introductory thought to his use of those words. And that same introductory thought is found 3 times as well. He said in verse 26, if you don't hate all of these people, father, mother, brother, sister, wife, children, yes, even your own life also, and here's this introductory thought, you cannot be my disciple. And of course, from our study of a couple of weeks ago, when we were in that passage, we learned that Jesus isn't actually teaching us to hate, but is engaged in a grammatical tool called antithesis, where he uses the opposite concept to emphasize the point he's wanting to make. And the point is, you have to love me more than anybody else in your life, or you can't be my disciple. And this cannot be is not prohibitive. You are not allowed to be. It's more prescriptive. The word translated carries the idea of power. And so Jesus is saying, actually, if you don't love me more than anyone else in your life, you don't have what it takes to be my disciple. Count the cost, pay the price. Now we come to another one in verse 27. Whoever does not bear his own cross, come after me, cannot be my disciple. In verse 33 again, therefore, anyone who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple. And so Jesus is painting a vivid picture of what he sees when he uses the word disciple. And if you're not willing to do this, you don't have what it takes to be what I have in mind when I say disciple. So we have to love Jesus more than anyone else. We come to verse 27 for our thoughts today, Robert. Let me read that passage again, and then you break it down briefly for us, and then let us just really make it breathe for our thoughts today. Verse 27. Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be, doesn't have what it takes to be my disciple.
Mm.
What comes to your mind when you hear those words, Robert?
Mhm. Obviously, the cross has a lot to do with Jesus's ministry. That's an understatement. But as I'm trying to put myself in the minds of the disciples as they are initially hearing this, and by the way, this isn't just the 12 to whom he's addressing. There are great crowds who have accompanied, and he turned to said to them, so to them all.
Yes.
This isn't something that's limited to the 12. In other words, this is for all of us. So, what must have been in their minds? Obviously, they're acquainted with the form of capital punishment common during the Roman era of that day. It had spanned much time by this point in the first century. They know here's someone who's carrying his cross is someone who's been convicted of a crime. It's not a matter of being on trial anymore. It's a matter of an impending death. In fact, the death is good as done. If I'm carrying that cross, I'm
Uh-huh.
carrying it to the place where the execution is going to take place. At least the 12, if not a broader audience than that, would also be familiar with the fact that Jesus himself is anticipating a cross of his own.
Right.
Peter, most notably, has tried to stand in the way of that, to which Jesus replied, "Get behind me, Satan. You don't even know what you're talking about." And as we turn even in Luke's narrative, we see this is not the first time that Jesus has made the cross a focal point of his teaching, either in what he himself faces or even in what his disciples must also prepare themselves in one sense or another to face.
Hmm.
And I think we have in mind to go to several of these passages, but particularly down to Luke chapter 9. We could go to places like Matthew 10:38, Matthew 16:24. What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? For what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? There is a death that must be died. There must be this notion of living for something else. We could look in Mark chapter 8, verse 34 as well. But if we're going to stay right here in Luke's narrative, I think we go back to Luke chapter 9, where Jesus has obviously already mentioned this idea of a
Hmm.
cross and perhaps even fleshes it out a little bit more for us to understand what he means in this passage, our passage of the day, by saying bearing his own cross, right?
Right. Here's a man that leaves his cell and is walking to the gas chamber,
Mm,
and you think of the words "dead man walking."
yep.
I mean, and that was an individual carrying his cross. He was a dead man walking.
Hmm.
And in that concept or with that word picture, Jesus is teaching us that we are to be dead men walking with and for him.
Hmm.
We die to ourselves. So let's go to this Luke 9, verse 23, where Jesus uses the same concept a little earlier in the narrative that Luke gives us. Let's read that passage and break it down a little bit. Luke 9, verse 23, and he said to all, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Now, let's break that down, Robert, with a few words, just key words that we might want to put in the margin of our Bible or in our notes if we're not driving and sitting down at a table and with a pad. Let's break that down in let's say one, two, three, four, 5 words. First of all, word number one in Luke 9:23, I see the word desire. If anyone would, if anyone would. And the concept behind the word that's translated would is this idea of a desire to seize, literally, to seize with the mind. It's the word you find in Philippians 1:23 where Paul says, I have a desire to go to be with Christ. Uh, I have a desire to depart and be with Christ. And this concept of departing in Philippians 1:23, he's talking about his death. I'm ready to go. I want to die so I can be with Jesus. And this idea of departing is a word that means it was setting sail. It was loosening the ship from the moorings of the dock so that the ship could set sail on the sea. And Paul says, I have a desire to depart. I want to be loosed from the moorings of mortality in this world so that I can set sail on the sea of eternity and be with Jesus. I have a desire to do that. I have seized with my mind that concept of being with Jesus. That's what I want.
Mm.
And that's the word or concept that we have here with Jesus in Luke 9:23. We have to seize with the mind. We have to have this desire to walk with Jesus if we're going to walk with Jesus. This is not just deciding, okay, I'm going to be a Christian, or, I need to be baptized, or I was raised in the church. I need to be a member of the church. I'm going to become a member of the church. All of my friends at camp are getting baptized. I need to get baptized. None of that. Yes, believing, repenting, confessing, being baptized, being added by the Lord to his church are all a part of God's plan for man. But you have to have a desire that is just encapsulating to be the true disciple Jesus wants you to be. Being with Jesus, having Jesus with you is everything. So if anyone would, there's this desire. Now, the second word, you chime in anytime you want to. Don't let me just keep talking now, Robert.
I was just thinking, I wonder if this is a part in some way or another that we miss, or maybe that gets cool over time for those of us who are disciples of Jesus, who are Christians. Paul never let it cool. And I guess this is something we've got to really keep in check. You mentioned Philippians 1, though. I mean, here's Paul, and he's in these situations. He's in prison because of the Lord, right? He's in chains, as he put it, because of at least the message, preaching Jesus. But he still says, I know being with Jesus is far better. I guess I wonder if sometimes if our modern lifestyle and the blessings of living in a country where Christianity is not and has not been persecuted to the extent that it has in certain other places of the world in modern times, and certainly as it was in New Testament times, if that blessing cannot also be in some form a liability, because we do get very comfortable and we're not often asked to choose Jesus over something else. It's just kind of a part of living life. Maybe there are listeners who are living in other parts of the world or even other parts of this country where religion is not such a prominent feature of society. We're podcasting from the South. It's not as much prominent as it once was, but it is still certainly there. And here we are at Thanksgiving time. We're entering into the Christmas season, and even those who may be moderately religious will be a little more so near the end of the year than they are maybe in the heat of the summer. But the point is, like, I've got to come to terms with, and I've got to not let it grow cool, that Jesus really is better than anything else. Now, this podcast, I guess part of what we do is to try and help make sure that doesn't grow cool in us. I mean,
Right.
I'm thinking we've seen that all throughout Acts. We certainly saw it in Mark. We've seen it in Colossians. Now we're seeing it in our study of what it means to be a disciple. But see, like, why would anybody do the things that Jesus We've already seen in the previous 9 episodes of this season that Jesus requires them to do. Well, it's because we realize that Jesus is better than everything else. We have a real desire.
Right.
I don't know.
You
I
know,
just think this is so fundamental, and maybe we don't emphasize it as much as we should.
it's so easy in a life that is as busy as our lives are.
Well, that's right. Yeah.
It's so easy to departmentalize.
Hmm.
And our relationship with Jesus becomes part of something that is done. Now, that's Sunday.
Yeah.
And then, okay, Monday, I have this quota to meet, and Tuesday, I have these meetings. And so, our relationship with Jesus, we departmentalize into
Mhm.
just something that's part of our religion, that is a part of our week on Sunday.
Mhm.
And that's just not the case. Jesus expects to be not part of our lives, but remember Colossians 3:4, he is our life.
Mhm.
Every aspect of our life is totally um, all about Jesus.
And people are looking for that too. I mean, I think that in addition to that commitment that's required, there's a strong segment of people, and that this is especially true, I know, as you know, of from the younger generations, who are
Mhm.
longing to see people who really do have that desire, who don't want Christianity to merely be ritualistic religion, something
Correct.
that's only on Sundays. And maybe that's part of it. We need to make sure that people know, well, Jesus is the real deal, and therefore I'm going to live like it, and I'm
You know,
going to talk like it too.
one of the key um, characteristics of your generation, the millennials, and I don't have to tell you this because you, as old boy says, you be one. Uh,
For
but
better
one of
or
the
for worse, here we
yeah,
are.
yeah, your generation is phenomenal. It's gotten a bad rap by some that are older. Maybe it's out of jealousy. I don't know, but your generation is phenomenal. And one of the key characteristics of the millennials is you're so theocentric. You
Mm,
want a relationship, a connection with God. And of course, Jesus himself said, no man comes to the Father but by me. And so, my point is, our message here and the concept of Jesus when it comes to discipleship, literally, um, it offers your generation what you're looking for.
mm,
And that is a relationship with God that's possible only by having a strong relationship with Jesus.
mm,
And Jesus starts this particular passage that we're looking at today by saying, you have to want that. You have to desire a
mm,
relationship with me to have one. The second word in Luke 9:23, if anyone would come after me. The second word is direction.
mm,
Come after me, not come after those that you admire who are following me, not come after a preacher that is most influential in your life, not come after someone that has touched your life by being good or kind to you. But if anyone will come unto me, not if anyone would want to be somebody with me,
mhm,
but if anyone would come to me. Jesus is the one to whom we are to go. He is at the finish line. Our eyes are on him. We hear his voice ringing in our ears, encouraging us one step at a time as we run. Jesus is our everything, and we're striving to come to him,
mm.
the direction. I remember what he said in Matthew 10, come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, I'll give you rest. And so here, if anyone really wants to come unto me, I remember Paul in Colossians 3:1 and 2. He was talking about we are to seek things that are above. And then he makes this statement, where Christ is. And the whole idea is even our desire to go to heaven. It's not about a street of gold or pillars of pearl or a jewel bedecked foundation. It's not even about the great heroes and heroines of the faith that'll be there. Our desire to go to heaven is overcome by one thought. I want to be with Jesus. We seek things that are above because that's where Jesus is, sitting at the right hand of God. So there's this desire that seizes our mind. And then there's this direction. It's a desire to come to and be with Jesus. The third word is denial. If anyone would, if anyone would come unto me. And then after that statement, giving us the concept of a desire and a direction, Robert, we find three imperative verbs, meaning three commands, three things that are essential if we have this desire to come to Jesus. Imperative number one, let him deny himself. And that's an aorist imperative, not being wishing to be too detailed, but the concept is pointed action. You come to a point in your life when you say, I am no more. I am all about Jesus. It is no more about me. Let him deny himself. James 1:14, you remember it says, each man is tempted when he's drawn away by what?
His own desires.
His own desires and enticed. I have to say no to my desires and say yes to Jesus' desires. There must be this denial of self, not something that I constantly do. The word is I come to the point and boom, it is done. I make this decision. It is no longer about me. And from that point, it's all about Jesus. And that makes other decisions a lot easier to make. And it helps me stay focused. So desire, direction, denial. Here's the fourth word, and that is decision. Or if we wanted to follow the D's, have you caught that already?
I've noticed that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've
you
seen a
noticed that.
pattern here.
I'm sure you did. Being a preacher's mind, you catch that alliteration.
Of course.
If we wanted to use another word, we could use death, decision or death. If anyone would come unto me, let him deny himself, imperative number one, imperative number two, and take up his cross. And that's an aorist imperative, meaning I come to a point in which I say it is no longer about me. And I come to a point in which I say, I have died to me. I'm dead. I'm dead. I am living for Jesus. For me to live is Christ, Paul said in Philippians 1:23. And that's this concept here, dying to self, taking up the cross. What do you think about that, Robert?
Well, it reminds me a lot of Paul in Galatians this time. You went to Philippians earlier. I'm going to go over Galatians chapter 2 and verse 20. He says, I have been crucified with Christ. Now, if I put a pin in it right there, I think, okay, wait a minute. Paul wasn't hanging on one of the three crosses on that hill called Mount Calvary.
No.
What are you talking about? Well, if I put this together with what Jesus is telling us in Luke 9:23 and in Luke 14:27, suddenly I'm starting to sort of get a picture now. And Paul comes in and he says, okay, I've done that. I am trying to take up my cross daily. And he says, I have been crucified, which indicates, all right, this is something that the initial decision was made at a point in the past, but now it keeps on. The effects of this are lasting. He continues, it's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. I think that Paul is helping us a little bit. This is interesting to whom he is writing. He's writing to Christians throughout this region, this New Testament region of Galatia. It wasn't one place. It was a variety of places. It was a whole region of them.
Right.
And these are a people whose desires really had grown cold. If you survey the book, you'll find in chapter 1, he says, I'm surprised that you're being tempted away from the true gospel of Jesus to what is being peddled as another gospel. And he says, there's really no such thing as a different gospel. If you go to Galatians 5, he says, you have fallen from grace. Here are some people who are really being tempted, and evidently it has to do with Judaism, because there's a great focus on that in Galatians chapter 3, and Paul will try and demonstrate to them, listen, it's not works of the law that really justify it. It's faith in Jesus, and the law was really intended to point us to Jesus. So what is the cure for someone whose desire has grown cold? I think as you survey Galatians, the emphasis is found 6 times. Paul alludes 6 times in one form or fashion to the cross of Jesus. And by pointing at them and focusing them on the cross of Jesus, he provides for them the motivation and the desire for identifying myself with his cross and even conforming to his death. Let me show you just a few of these real quickly throughout Galatians.
Great.
In Galatians chapter 1, verse 4, he alludes to Jesus, who gave himself for our sins, that's an allusion to the cross, to deliver us from the present evil age, according to the will of our God and Father.
What verse is that, Robert?
Galatians 1, verse 4.
Okay.
Galatians 1, verse 4. The second time is the one we just read, Galatians 2:20. I have been crucified with Christ. And the third allusion to the cross is in the very next verse, Galatians 2:21. I do not nullify the grace of God, for if righteousness were through the law, then Christ died for no purpose. He's refocusing them upon Jesus and what Jesus has done. And then the next verse, Galatians 3, verse 1. O foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you? It's like he's saying, what are you thinking? What's gotten into you? It was before your eyes that Jesus Christ was publicly portrayed as crucified. So there's our third reference, Galatians 1, or fourth, Galatians 1:4, Galatians 2:20, Galatians 2:21, and now Galatians 3, verse 1. All right, then we drop down to verse 13. Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone who is hanged on a tree. And then, did I say 6? I guess I meant 7. Galatians 5:24 and Galatians 6:14. Here's 5:24. Those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. See, now Paul's made a shift, and he does this, doesn't he, in his epistles? He'll give us sort of a doctrinal component in the first half, and then he makes that doctrine really practical. Here's how you live this out in the back half. So we have this doctrinal, we could say theological, Christological, first 3 chapters. In Galatians 2:20, he hints at the application. I'm crucified with Christ. I'm not alive anymore. He's living in me. And what that looks like in part is Galatians 5:24, crucifying the flesh with its passions and desires. All right, so I've got
saying no to yourself.
I've got to desire Jesus more than I desire myself. And then here's 6:14. This is the final allusion by my count to the cross in Galatians. Far be it from me to boast, except in the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ, by which the world has been crucified to me and I to the world. All right, so there's a death that's taken place. There's a denial. We see Luke 9:23 all throughout this, that this denial, Paul says, I'm not alive anymore. It's Jesus who's living in me. All this started, and then I'll throw it back because I've got to quit. We're going overtime. But all this started by us discussing the fact that, Jesus said, you got to bear your cross. You're a dead man walking. Well, how does a dead man walk? How do you live like someone who's dead? And I think Paul would say, well, that's a good question, but let's modify it a little bit. Because really, the question goes like this. How does one who was dead but has now been given new life,
Ah,
live.
ah,
And he points that out in this text. It's true. We are dead men and women walking.
mhm.
We're dead in one sense because the wages of sin is death. That's the bed that I made. That's the hole that I dug. And without Jesus, I've got to lie in that. That's where I am. And Jesus says that person has to die if anybody's going to come after me. If you're going to follow me, you can't keep being like that. And why would you want to be? But in Galatians 2:20, Paul gives us the effect of this when he says in the back half of the verse, I'm not alive anymore. And Paul views that as a net positive. He says,
He did.
Christ is alive in me. Now, that doesn't mean that Paul was stripped of his past that made him, a part of who he is, his personality, his emotion, all his talents. It's all still there, but that's been harnessed now by the power of Jesus. And Paul says, now Jesus is on display in all of this, in me. And I was dead, but now I've been given a new life. And so the life that I live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God. And how could I not? Because he loved me more than I could possibly begin to fully grasp. And he gave himself up for me, demonstrating by sacrifice the extent of that love that he has shown for me.
Yeah.
And I think Paul gives us a great practical example of what it is that Jesus is calling upon us here in Luke chapter 9, this decision to die, this
Yes.
death that must take place.
Excellent. So when people see me, they are to see Jesus.
Yeah.
When they hear me speak, they are to hear Jesus speaking. And this is the way Jesus would respond to this type of circumstance. This is how Jesus would react to this kind of mistreatment. This is the kind of person Jesus would be in this environment. So they should constantly see Jesus in me.
And I'm
So
doing that not just because Jesus died for me, but because I died with Jesus and I'm rising to walk in a new life.
like him.
Yeah. And it's a life that's been empowered by the very death that he died and the subsequent resurrection that he rose.
That's beautiful.
So, yeah, there's so much to this. And I think it's just something that a lot of times people who only hear little bits and pieces of Christianity miss. But it's been at the heart of discipleship all along, as we're seeing in today's study.
Yeah. So there's one more word here, desire. If anyone would, direction come unto me, denial, let him deny himself. He comes to a point when he says, it's no longer about me. Decision or death, take up his cross. He comes to a point and says, it's no longer about me. I have died to me.
Mm.
And then there is a determination. Let him deny himself, imperative number one, take up his cross, imperative number two, and follow me, imperative number three. And Robert, this is interesting to me. Again, not to be technical, but there's a word picture that is painted here. You have deny, that's an aorist pointed tense verb, come to a point in which you deny yourself. There's an aorist pointed tense verb, take up his cross. Once and for all, you deny yourself. Once and for all, you take up your cross, you die to yourself. But then it says, follow me, and that's a present tense verb. And that means present tense was the verb form they would use to carry the idea of continued action. So once and for all, you say no to yourself. And once and for all, you make the decision to die to yourself. And then from that point, you just keep on following me. So there's a determination. We must be determined to constantly let Jesus be seen in our lives. And that takes us back to our passage of Luke chapter 14, verse 27, where he's telling us, if you aren't willing to do this, you don't have what it takes to be my disciple. So simply put, it's not that complex. I have to love Jesus more than anyone else. And then I am to live a life consumed by Jesus more than everything else
Mm.
to be his disciple. Simply say no to self. And yes, 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 it's always yes to Jesus. And that's what he has in mind with the title disciple.
Mm. And what you realize is Jesus isn't just some dictator who's forcing this.
Mm-mm.
It's a life worth living. There's plenty of motivation, plenty of reason.
And why wouldn't I want to live like that?
That's right.
With and for my friend and my Savior.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, we went overtime, didn't we?
We did, but it was worth it.
Yep.
I have
It was
no
my
regrets.
fault, but then it was your fault too.
It was.
We both got to preaching, didn't
I'll
we?
accept responsibility. Yeah, it's okay.
No, you.
TheLightNetwork.tv/TWJ is where you can find our previous episodes. If you've missed any part of this study, you just got to go back and listen to it. It's not about the two of us so much as it is just about the content that we've been covering. You've got to go back and check out a little bit more about what Jesus meant by the title disciple. In fact, the entire library, all 8 seasons of Today with Jesus, is available absolutely free on our website, thelightnetwork.tv/TWJ. Incidentally, that's also where you can find subscription links to make it easier for you to receive our episodes as they're released. And we're producing both audio and video via YouTube, and so you can find all the links there. You have questions or comments, you want to offer some feedback, we'd love to hear from you. There's a contact form on that website, too. It's really a one-stop shop, thelightnetwork.tv/TWJ. You can look for new episodes of Today with Jesus every Tuesday from that website and from our podcasting partners. And I hope you'll join us next week. We round out Luke's our time in Luke with this discipleship notion with Luke 14, verse 33. Disciples are loyal to Jesus more than to anything else. I look forward to that. But until then, let's live today and every day with Jesus in our heart and our ways.
God bless everybody.
See ya.